was a cool conversation we had, and yeah, I forget what we talked about at the end. It got really weird at the end, but it was like weird in a good way, like funny. Like when I do the rapid fire questions, sometimes people just go on a weird tangent, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna keep all of that in, bro. So, I'm not going to do it, but it may happen because every time I looked up your name and typed your name, and it kept autocorrecting to Bruce Willis, and I was like, I refuse.
Well, to be honest, when you first messaged me, I was like, wait, Rod Lee, the Baltimore club DJ, like is like, I was like, he wants to interview me, and then I'm like, oh wait, it's Rob Lee.
Yep. Different. That's great. That's great, actually. It's funny. I had this interview a little while ago with this chef, Adam Estes, and he was just like, so when is Rod Lee and Rob Lee doing a podcast together?
Yes.
I'm like, look, if I can make that happen, I've reached out a few times. If I can make that happen, we're here for it. We're here for it. Welcome to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee. And my next guest that I have the privilege of being in conversation with is a multidisciplinary designer, artist, and founder of Public Mechanics, a design and art studio working in public and cultural spaces. Please welcome Bruce Willen. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Rob. Thanks so much for having me. Really excited for this conversation.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to chopping it up, spinning the yarn, as it were. So before we get too deep into it, could you share like your story, your first experience with art, design, or even music? Because that's another thing I kind of omitted from there a little bit. So speak to me about that. Share a little bit about your story and what kind of led you to maybe your current work.
Yeah, and I think it's one thing that I feel like in my career, I've sort of previously like really separated some of these different aspects, like siloed the sort of art and design and music from each other. And I feel like just like more recently, I've been sort of embracing all of them and saying like, oh, it's okay to have more overlap. And I'm not totally sure why I wound up doing it in the first place, but the music really does tie into like how I got into design, at least more recently. I feel like a lot of people are probably most familiar with my work through Post Typography, which is a design studio that I co-founded with my collaborator Nolan Strauss here in Baltimore about 15 years ago. And we actually kind of started doing the design studio. It came out of this band that we were playing in at the time called Double Dagger, which was this punk band that had like very rowdy live shows. Nolan, he was the singer / screamer, and I played bass. And then Dennis Bone was our drummer. And I think being a musician in a band, like being a designer / musician in a band, it's really fun because you get this opportunity to make your own album covers and design your T-shirts and make posters. And that was really kind of what led to us founding the design studio back in 2007. So, but really, like before all of that, I mean, I grew up in this really small town in New Mexico called Portales. That was this very, very dusty, kind of small, like literally very dusty town in the high desert. It's like totally flat. There's no trees. Like you walk outside of town and you can see like miles in each direction. Yeah. Like really kind of in the middle of the desert. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, like as a kid, I was always really into drawing, like a lot of kids. And in particular, I think I really was gravitating towards the more what I now say like was the design side of art, and that I always liked more kind of functional drawings. Like I'd always geek out over maps. Like a lot of kids, I drew cars all the time. I remember, I think when I first realized that their like designer was a job, there was this documentary on PBS that was about like the history of the car or something like that. And for some reason we had taped it on like a VHS tape off the TV. And I like, when I was a kid, I must have like worn that tape out, like watching it so many times. Yeah. And it was cool because they'd like interview these car designers and show them like doing these clay models of cars. And I I think it was cool seeing it at that age because it was this idea like, oh, there's somebody, a person who is a designer who's actually like making these things that we see all around us, and it doesn't just magically happen. Or maybe you say like the designer is kind of the magician who makes all of it happen.
I will throw this in there, which I think you might find interesting. I've spent some time in Clovis, and I've gone through Portales on more than one occasion. I have a brother that lived down there, so yeah.
Oh, crazy!
It's very flat. It's very flat.
Yeah.
The land of enchantment.
Yeah, that's wild. Though. What was your brother doing there?
He was like the biggest car salesman in Clovis, New Mexico, and he was like, "The reason I am because I'm probably the only black guy here." And so yeah, we went down there. My other brother and I and my dad with our kind of East Baltimore kind of steez and going down there with that energy. And it's like, yeah, these guys are from Baltimore. That's where The Wire was filmed. I was like, can you not put that out there like that? Jeez. So yeah, it's cool to go down there.
Yeah, that's wild. I wonder if he sold my parents a car at some point.
It's really funny. So tell us about public mechanics and like what was the thinking and kind of formation and bringing it together and things of that nature, because so it's a laundry list that I'm going to get into a little bit later of clients, and it's recognizable around local parts here. So I wanted to kind of get that kind of introductory sort of conversation started.
Yeah, well, so with the work we were doing at Post Typography, I think we had been moving more and more into these like kind of like bigger sort of multifaceted projects that a lot of times would have something like a component that was in the built environment, or like a three-dimensional work to it. Like we worked on the Parkway Theater with the Maryland Film Festival, and I think a lot of people in Baltimore are familiar with our work with the festival. Loved that. Loved doing film related stuff. And I think like working on these types of projects really made me excited about like I think like rekindled my love for doing work in public space and 3D spaces and built environment, as well as I think I had just been getting like a little bit burnt out on maybe some of the commercial side of the business, and not that Post Typography was a super commercial agency ever. I mean, not even really close to it. But I really liked the idea of wanting to see if I could focus my practice a little bit more on, this like work that has this more cultural component, has like a big public art component, and also building in more self-initiated projects into the mix, sure. Which was something that we didn't really get as much of a chance to do as we wanted at Post Typography.
So this is going to sound ridiculous, and I think you touched on it, but let's kind of spread this out a little bit further. What is it about typography that excites you? Which you got to say it like that, and it's like, hold up, and in it there are some other things in there. Like I'll leave the other bullet points in there, but I at least want to start off there, and then I'll ask other bullet points as we go along in it. So what is it about typography that excites you?
That's like another reason that I think I gravitated towards being a designer, is that I liked reading, and have always loved language, and like, I don't know, just geeking out over like dumb like word games and stuff like that. And I think like, typography is so cool, is it's taking like the alphabet, which is this endlessly both simple yet complex set of these shapes. And obviously there's not just one alphabet, there's the Latin and Roman alphabet that we use, but there's like many other alphabets, and you can just like take any one of these and kind of have these different permutations of the letters looking different ways, arranged in different ways, and just like generate, I don't know, countless like emotions, feelings. It's this container for like cool ideas. It's just like, it's something that is really fun. It's like something like taking something very small and simple, and like the further you dive into it, the deeper it goes.
So what would you say, like, it could be local, it could be outside of local, but what are like some brands that, and maybe what this is more of a design oriented question, but I think you obviously can answer this. What are some local brands or brands that come to mind that really stick out because of their text or their use of maybe a certain sort of letter language, if you will? I just coined that. Feel free to steal it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always someone who gravitates towards that. I I mean, this is maybe just like my personal taste. I gravitate a lot of times towards like signs and like especially like things like that are older and a little bit more idiosyncratic. And even, in Baltimore, obviously the Domino sugar sign is this like huge local landmark, and it's uh, like when I first moved to Baltimore and saw like and was sort of learning how to become a designer and like would go downtown and see that the sign and be like, man, this like it's so cool. It's like must be like 3 or 4 stories tall. It's like bright red and has the just like that very cool domino script on it. That's just like so recognizable and iconic. But yeah, I don't know. I just like always really like weird and idiosyncratic stuff as well. Like there's this tire shop on York Road called I think it's like Gomez Tire Shop.
I know that place.
Yeah. Every time I drive by there, they have the coolest hand painted signs that are you could tell that it's hand lettering as opposed to typography, is because like the letters are like a little imperfect. There's like each one like the E's are slightly different from each other, and it has this just really like fun quality where it's like it feels like professional, but at the same time it's just got energy and spirit in it.
It has that kind of that I think that part of the culture that's here, that DIY thing, still while being professional, but also kind of staying in that sort of DIY spirit. It's like, yeah, there's some imperfection in here because I did this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think that's something that I really love about Baltimore is that there's this real DIY spirit across like the arts community, but also in the business community, the design community, and it does create this like real just kind of idiosyncratic language to the city that I think it's it's kind of maybe hard to like pinpoint what does Baltimore look like. But I think that it has this eclecticism to it and this a little bit of like a scrappy DIY quality that I feel like is kind of this common theme that is still here and is maybe like there's less of it in other cities I found, where it's like I feel like it's going away in a lot of places.
And I like that you kind of did a little daily double right there. You answered one of my later questions in there. I was like, what's the visual language of Baltimore? You kind of touched on it. So shout out to you. So I want to ask this. So I see that, Public Mechanics is worked with, Bopa, Pickle Studio, Union Craft Brewing, and collaboration, seeing like those kind of fingerprints in and around Baltimore, places that are kind of like landmarks. Like when we think of landmarks, I think we think of like these things that are old or what have you, but not things that are current. And looking at like Union, for instance, been around for 10 years, what have you. So that starts to fall into one of those spots. Like this as a brand has been around for 10 years, but that is a meeting place for a lot of different people. And so when it turns into like collaboration or partnering or bringing in clients, what are certain things that you look for in those sorts of relationships? Like, what is that kind of like North Star for you?
So I think it was Tibor Kalman, who's a pretty well-known designer, who said, I think it said something to the effect of, look for clients who are smarter than you. And I feel like that's like one element. I mean, obviously clients who are smarter than you is great, but just in general, like a client who will push you and challenge you, I think that is always the best kind of relationship. Like obviously having that kind of client, the collaborative relationship, but if someone comes to me and says, hey, like I'm trying to do this thing, and I like the way that if I was going to do it, I'd do it this one way, but I want you to like try and show me something that is like totally different, is maybe going to challenge like my audience or my community a little bit, and like push things a little bit. Like, so I think having somebody who sort of understands that there's like, hey, like you like or us, as designers, like we're going to bring a different perspective to it, and sort of be open to that, and kind of like give us the freedom to do that kind of work, but at the same time also kind of push us to do our best work. I think that's really important. And then I'd say like the second element of that is just somebody who's doing really great work themselves in whatever field that they're in, whether it's, doing like programming, like really amazing films, like the film festival is doing, like bringing like this cool cultural event to Baltimore, or, making really great beer, or doing or being like the museum, like sort of having a vision for that museum that is, like very inclusive and like forward thinking, and like trying to like change things. I think all of that is, but those are all like, I think, great things to have in a client relationship, and obviously the collaborative element is really key to that too.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think, like, I always ask this sort of question, but I want to make it a little bit more of a challenge. People can easily answer, like, what's your source of inspiration and so on. And usually they're kind of like, you kind of get an idea of like, okay, that makes sense. That would make sense as a source of inspiration. What sorts of kind of like uncommon source of inspiration, like, for instance, for me to do better questions, right? One would think, or to do a podcast, one would think, oh, you're going to different podcast functions and you get inspired by talking to other podcasters or even artists or so on. But in fact, I get inspired by listening to really old audiobooks. Like, let me tap into something old from Dale Carnegie. Let me tap into something that is like old philosophy, and it kind of jogs loose certain ideas that I actually want to know what this person thinks about this. So that's something that's uncommon for me, I guess. What would you say is something that's an uncommon source of inspiration that's embedded in your work?
I mean, I think something that I always get really inspired by the city environment around me. And I think I wouldn't necessarily, I'm trying to think. I mean, I do feel like it can be uncommon if you're looking for the right kind of things. And like for me, the stuff that I always find most inspiring is just like weird stuff that you see in the city. And there's like something that you'd like mostly like only see in the city. Like you don't necessarily see it if you go out to like a really nice suburban, like manicured housing development. It's like, I don't know, that juxtaposition of like somebody has like thrown out some like old mattress and it's like sitting on top of this poster, and it's covering up half of the poster, so the poster says something else, but then like someone's like tagged some like funny picture on the mattress. So I don't know, like all that kind of these like juxtapositions of things that happen in the city, I think are just like endlessly inspiring. I mean, the thing that this is also probably kind of weird. I'm like really inspired by bricked up windows that you see. Okay. If like, and I've been taking photos of this stuff for, I don't know, like over a couple decades actually. Just like you see, like it's just like you're walking down like some alley and there's like some like used to be a window there, and someone has like done this really like sloppy job like putting like cinder blocks or like random colored bricks in the window. Yeah. And if you start paying attention to them, like each one of them is like really, really unique. And it says a lot, I think, both about like the owner of the building, whoever made this, like what was going on at the time. Cause like sometimes they're like very, very neat. They've like really matched, like lined up the bricks, tried to like hide it. I think other times it might just be, we just got whatever bricks were like laying around in a pile and like threw them in here. And like, there's like mortar that's kind of like dripping down all over the place. And
we're trying to protect ourselves from the incoming like zombie invasion, and putting these bricks up in this haphazard way is the only way to do so.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I think like I'm inspired, but both from like the visual standpoint, but also there's this sort of like both sad, but also kind of funny, like metaphoric quality to it. That we're like this window, which is this object for like letting in light and having this transmission between the outdoor world and the indoor space. And we're just like turning it into a wall. We're like closing it off. We're closing ourselves inside, and uh, it's sad and a little bit poignant, but it also, I think, has this very like beautiful quality in the way that it's done in such this personal way to it.
Yeah, thank you. So I got two more real questions, and then I got those lovely, lovely, lovely rapid fire questions for you. So, as we get down into the fourth quarter, as we like to call it here, that's actually the first time I've called it that. What would you say is the biggest challenge you faced in being like, I consider you a professional creative, and some people may not use that sort of nomenclature for what they do, but what are some of the biggest challenges you face in doing the work that you do, and how do you overcome set challenges?
I mean, I feel like one of the biggest things, especially like earlier on, and even still today, is just kind of like understanding how to value and like the money side of stuff. Especially like early on when we were running post typography, we just like really like undervalued the work that we were doing, like undercharged for things. And part of it was because I think we like didn't know better. Like we didn't really have an understanding of like, oh, what is sort of an industry standard for designing an advertisement for someone or designing a logo. Part of it also, I think, just like maybe not being confident enough in ourselves. And, I think like, obviously like when you're young and starting off, like, yeah, you shouldn't charge like too much money because you're still figuring stuff out. You're getting an opportunity to like learn on the job. So that's worth something. But at the same time, it's like, you shouldn't be working for free. You shouldn't be going into debt to do work. And it's I feel like challenging, and especially in a place like Baltimore where there's not necessarily like huge amounts of money compared to other cities for projects. And sometimes there's this expectation that, I mean, I'm sure like, I know that you've talked about this with like your other guests too. They're like, artist, you're doing something you love, work for less money or work for free. And kind of I think like I've really been trying to get into the mindset of like thinking about like, what value does my work create for someone else, or for the client. If I'm charging money for it, like what value does it create for the client, both financially, but maybe intangibly. Like, what does it do for their brand or perception or their ability to like market themselves or get people to come to their park or museum or building.
I think I relate to that. I think a lot of folks relate to it as you're bringing in sort of client work where you're charging and so on. And, I spend a nice chunk of my time, probably about 30% of my time, and that I kind of dedicate towards some of the administrative stuff, but even some of this kind of outreach oriented stuff to maybe looking for clients and things of that nature. And I think what I try to do, and I'm not as vocal about it and out there about it, but I try to bring in a client here and there that I might be a ghost podcaster for or consultant for to kind of fund this and keep this something that's an unfunded but unsullied project. Because I think when you bring in funding or bring in funders, suddenly someone now has a little bit more control or say over your expression. And that's not really something I'm super interested in. But when it is those instances where there is a collaboration that falls within this line, I'm like, all right, this is kind of what I'm looking for. We can kind of talk about it. Here's a draft or whatever. Here's an MOU. We can talk about it. But, it's also one of the things that you said that resonated with me is early on, not knowing any better, I was undercharging and, seeing folks, I'm like, oh, got new clients off of that and so on. And it's like not really having the industry standards set up or being miscategorized as, oh, well, this is an influencer thing. No, this is probably more marketing oriented for some of you folks. And you guys have a marketing budget. And, it's not a matter of, because I had this recently where someone was like, this is the budget that I have. And it was probably a third of what I asked for. And I was like, okay, then I can offer a third of what you're looking for and be confident in doing that, because it's like, I know how I value my work and I know how people see what this is and what maybe benefits come from it. But that takes that time, that confidence, and that kind of repetition, and also writing it out. I think at a point when I put together a a deck, a press kit, if you will, and saying like, this is kind of what I do, and these are the analytics that back it up, using my day job as a data analyst. I was like, oh, so this is my reasoning, my methodology for it. And it's either cool, I can move on, but it's less scarcity, more abundance is what I try to go for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important. Like one thing that whenever I'm advising younger designers or creative people is just try and have those like money conversations like early on in the or like before you kind of get too far down the road talking about a project with a client or someone. Just like make sure that the expectations are really clear and I think trying to identify like what you need to be able to do your work in a way that you're actually getting paid for it and and sometimes maybe some instances that might be, if it's like a really low budget project, be like, all right, I just need to get paid enough to cover my time, not feel like I'm being taken advantage of. But if you're working for a client who has money, like it's a big nonprofit or a corporation or someone, it's like hey, like I need to be getting paid whatever, how like $100 an hour or something, or whatever it is that you feel like is your kind of baseline rate, plus thinking about like all the time, like you're saying, all the time that kind of goes into it, like the bookkeeping and the sort of like going after new business and all that stuff. It's I feel like it's something I've just like sort of had to learn about all this stuff like over the years, and like it's not very good figuring it out. And I feel like younger people are coming up or just getting a lot better at that, hopefully. And hopefully. And I would just like say to you all, I think it's like anyone who's listening to this, who's just getting into design or creative field, just like, I'd say, don't undersell yourself. If someone is trying to take advantage of you or, get you to work for exposure or whatever, like take a really hard look at, like, is this the kind of person you want to work with? One, or like a corporation or like an institution, whatever it is. One, and two is like, yeah, what are you getting out of it? What are they getting out of it? And, because a lot of like almost every time it's like they're going to get more out of it than you are.
100%. 100%. And yeah. So I guess the last real question, I'm going to modify it a little bit. From a design, from an art, from any perspective, because, we like to drop jewels here. We like to drop gems here. And I think you had a piece here a second ago, which I think is very salient. But if you could, what is one thing? It could be advice, it could be whatever you want. But what is one thing that you want to offer the community from your vantage point, from your lens?
I think really being like trying to be supportive of each other in the creative community, I think is very important. And that can mean either, trying to like hire each other, hire other artists, hire other, hire musicians or filmmakers, photographers, whoever, if you're working on a project. And if there's an opportunity to bring someone in a way that you're like, okay, this is a project that this person can get paid or be like helpful doing this. And like trying to create that like collaborative environment, I think is really great wherever you can. And I know it's not always possible everywhere, but just trying to like foster the sense of community wherever you can is something that is super important.
100%. Couldn't say it better myself. So with that, I want to bring in a few. I'm going to wheel it in the rapid fire questions. I got a couple of them. Don't overthink them. Don't overthink them.
I've honestly been like, this is the part that I'm like, oh man,
you're gonna be great. You're gonna be great. And we want to be as brief as possible here, because I think when we have time to overthink it, So I want to start off with this one. What is your favorite font?
ITC Franklin Gothic.
See, you just kind of threw that one out there. See, I can't even fact check it. I can't even see if that's a real thing. You could just made that up. I'm here. I'll accept it. Yeah. Mine's is Times New Roman because I'm boring. And I type it in italics because I'm way cooler than... No, never mind. That's a Hannibal Dryas joke. Don't worry about it. Sunrise or sunset?
Sunset.
What was the last book you read?
1491.
What was your last Google search?
Oh, I'd have to go look that up. I'd have to Google that one.
Okay. It's ridiculous. Rob Lee is probably the search, actually.
Yeah. I was like, what is it? Like Rod Lee Baltimore Club.
The truth is in this club. Lastly, Now, this is one that always trips people up, but I enjoy it because it's a little trolly. Describe what you do, but describe it poorly.
Describe it poorly.
Yeah.
All right. I make things that people can interact with and look at in the world in public.
That was a good example of describing what you do poorly. I love that.
Yeah, it's like it's really bad. Definitely would not going to put that on the website.
No, that's not on the LinkedIn. You know, it's like I'm a typography televangelist. It's like that's not what I do actually.
That's pretty good. That's a pretty cool description.
So with that, I want to thank you for being on this podcast. This has been a treat. It's been a great thing to kind of chat it up and spin a yarn with you, as it were. And in the final moments here, I want to invite and encourage you to tell the fine folks where to check you out, your work, and just to get a little bit more deeper in the conversation. So if you could share your social media website, whatever you want to share, the floor is yours.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Rob. This has been a really fun conversation. And if you want to find out more about Public Mechanics, about my work, it's at Public Mechanics on Instagram. I've got a couple of websites. Public Mechanics is the studio website, and then brucewillen.com. Also has some more personal work, some music stuff. I'm also working on a big public art and history project called Ghost Rivers. If you want to check out ghostrivers.com, there's going to be some more stuff coming up on that over the next few months, and the installations are starting next spring 2023. So check it out.
Well, there you have it, folks. Again, for Bruce Willen, I am Rob Lee, saying that there are designers, typography, all of that good stuff in and around Baltimore. You just got to look for it.